I'm Ken Fjord. Last year, I wrote a book for my son entitled The Graysonian Ethic, Lessons for My Unborn Son, in the months before he was born. Once he was born, I published the book on Amazon. He's now a happy bouncing baby, and I've decided to release the audiobook version for free on YouTube. Nobody owes you anything. Quick question, what, if anything, are you owed by virtue of your birth alone? The answer is that there's not a lot. My generation spent a lot of time going around talking about what they were entitled to and what others should be doing for them. And that just wasn't really the case. The first thing that people might look at would be their parents. Their parents owe them a good upbringing and all this. The thing is, there are plenty of kids with poor parents. First of all, there are plenty of parents who put their kids up for adoption, and there are plenty of parents who kill their kid in the womb. How's that for not being owed anything? A child is owed so little that someone can have the child surgically removed like a cancerous tumor. Once your parents have decided to take on the responsibility of having a child, even then there are a lot of things that parents don't have to do. They have to make sure that you get enough to eat, and there's some very bare minimum standards. But even then, there's plenty of terrible parents out there who face absolutely no repercussions for treating their kids terribly for massive amounts of time. There are kids who end up eating the cheapest food available basically through their entire childhood. There are people who grow up never seeing a penny in allowance. There are people who grow up never feeling a shred of love from their parents. There are people whose parents actively make them go out and do things that are bad because the parents will gain something. Some of these things might end up leading to the parents getting a comeuppance, but it would surprise you how many of them don't. In other words, your parents don't actually owe you a whole lot. Anything that they do for you is something that they do because they care about you. Next, you might say that the government owes you something. Well, let me pop that little bubble for you right now. The number one thing to remember about the government is, even if the government passes a law saying that they have to do a certain thing, the government is the one that makes those rules, and the moment that they want to, they can just change the rule. Different levels of government are going to stick to their word differently, and different governments are more or less corrupt, and that means a lot. I briefly dated a young indigenous woman. I really liked her. She was very nerdy and clever. She was interested in all these interesting things, and I really liked hanging out with her. She was given the money to go to college by the local tribal leaders, and she went there for part of the course, and halfway through the tribal leaders changed their mind and decided that they weren't going to pay for her anymore. So she ended up having to give up all of that time and all of that effort, and come slinking back to the middle of nowhere. We take for granted all the checks and balances in our system of government because they've been there basically forever. But that's not the case in a lot of governments, especially small governments like that. Once the decision is made, the decision is made. The government can say that you are entitled to something, and they can just as easily change their mind later. Then there's society. It's unlikely that society is ever even going to promise that you are entitled to something from it. But there's certainly things that occur that you might think you're somehow entitled to. Where you grow up, there might be some fantastic social programs put on by local groups, and you might think that you are somehow entitled to participate in those. The fact of the matter is that's simply not the case. All those people who are volunteering their time and volunteering their money could at any time decide that they don't want to do that anymore and stop making sacrifices on your account. How about employers? People will often talk about what an employer is supposed to be giving them, but the bottom line is an employer doesn't have to do anything. They can absolutely choose to disobey the law, and depending on how desperate you are, you might not have a choice. You might have to just accept the injustice. At the end of the day, nobody owes you anything. So the consequences of this are not that you should sit back and never try to achieve anything, that you should never try to get anything. The consequences are that you need to recognize that you aren't necessarily owed things, and if someone does something really nice for you, you should be immensely grateful because they don't need to do anything for you. In fact, if you're reading this, you are probably born into an entire world that is going to do things for you. Absolutely, there will be responsibilities, but you are probably going to live under governments that, while not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, are going to be consistent. They're extremely likely to at least try to give you the things that they say that they're going to try to give you, and if they don't give you those things, they're going to give you recourse. That's pretty amazing. For most of human history, that is not a thing that ever existed. Your king was the absolute sovereign and oftentimes was considered to be a direct descendant of God. So his word was considered almost as the word of God. Absolute. Your parents probably aren't going to be perfect, but they're going to work really hard and consider you to be one of the most valuable things in their lives. They're going to make sacrifices specifically for you that they don't have to make. Realistically, this book is a good example. I don't need to write a book. I already know all this stuff. Frankly, I would love to go out and play video games and drink beer, and do all those things that are fun rather than sitting here writing a book. I'm coming up to the end of the book now. I'm probably going to hire someone to do copy editing, and I'm probably myself going to do some serious content editing. That's going to take time, and it's also going to take money. I'm going to do it anyway, because I care about you even now, before you've been born. Our society is filled with incredibly giving people. There are people who dedicate their lives to doing good work that is never going to earn them a fortune, but might make the lives of a whole lot of people way better. Your mother has spent many hours volunteering at soup kitchens feeding the homeless, and decides that she always has an eye out for the downtrodden. When she sees people begging, where most people would just walk away, she likes to give them something to eat so that they're not starving to death on the streets. She's not alone. There's a shocking number of people who want to do good in the world. I hope that the point is clear here, that you aren't entitled to hardly anything. If you look at another person and they are doing something for you, it is almost never because they absolutely must. When governments, society, the people around you, your parents, any of them does something good for you, you should be grateful because they are making sacrifices on your behalf. On the flip side of that, while there are people out there who are purely good, not everyone is. There are a lot of times when people are going to give you something for free, and they aren't giving it to you out of kindness. They're giving it to you because they want something out of you. Governments, for example, are trying to buy your support and your vote. The fact that they do the things that they say they're going to do for you is great. But don't forget that the money that they use comes from someone else. Often, governments are going to offer you the world because they don't actually have to work for the money that they spend. The money that they spend comes from a few different places, but generally speaking, it's going to be from somebody else doing hard work. Governments charge income taxes, meaning that individuals spend their entire lives working and governments can get up to half of it. They charge property taxes, meaning that people have to work just for the privilege of exercising their fundamental human right to property. They charge tariffs, meaning that people have to work just a little bit harder to pay for something that somebody else made just because that somebody else happens to live in another country. The government can give, but the government also takes away. Overwhelmingly so. Companies are constantly going to be offering you things for free. I remember the first time that I got a personal cell phone that I was paying for. They just kept on using that word. Free this. Free that, everything for free. But that's not really the case. I was paying a lot of money for that cell phone. And all this stuff that wasn't free was very expensive. At the time I was making $1,180 every 2 weeks. And sometimes my cell phone bill, and this is before mobile data was a thing, would be $200 or $300 because I had made some long distance calls. Some very specific things might have been free, but the service most definitely was not. The internet is filled with stuff being provided for free. And there's usually one of three catches. The first is that the thing that's being provided for free isn't worth anything other than to lead you towards paying money. I run a number of websites, and for a short while, I ran my websites off of free hosting, and there was always a catch. They always wanted you to buy the next package up. That thing that was free might actually be hundreds of dollars. The second is that the thing that is free can be provided for free because the person or group providing the thing didn't pay for it, and hasn't any right to give you the thing. Growing up, there were lots of websites that would provide free software that were full versions of commercial software because they were pirated. The websites had absolutely no right to be providing that software at any price, and unfortunately by downloading it, they turned you into a criminal the same way. Finally, a lot of stuff that says that it's free is taking something from you without telling you. Particularly in the late 1990s, there were lots of pieces of software that were free of charge, but they would load your computer up with advertising software that would constantly pop ads up, slow down your computer and use up your computer's resources. Fully legal, but if you didn't know what they were doing, you might go out and buy a new computer because your perfectly fine computer would be running so slow from all the crap this software would install on it. Society can do great things for you too, and sometimes it's even no strings attached. Often though, you have to read the fine print. The church does amazing things for a lot of people, but if you're not careful it may just turn out that they are fishing for converts. A lot of people do things that appear to be good, but once you look a little bit deeper you realize that those people are using their good deeds to get power or money somehow. Employers can treat you very well, and you should absolutely be grateful when they do. However, don't forget that this is a two-way street. Companies don't hire people as a charity. Companies hire people because they know they can make more money by hiring you than by not. Particularly later in your career, once you've gained competence. Companies are going to want to treat you well because they want you to stay. They are going to try to treat you well because they don't want to have to pay you ridiculous amounts to stay in a toxic workplace. They're going to treat you well because they're trying to avoid regulators who can and will bring the hammer down on them for not being decent. Even your parents likely have, to an extent, an ulterior motive for making sure that they raise you the best they possibly can. Yes, your parents deeply love you on a level that is written in their DNA. However, they also have a vested interest in making sure that you grow up to be a fine adult. To begin with, you represent their legacy, the mark they will leave on the world after they are gone. Making sure that you grow up well ensures that their legacy is a good one. Next, many people in my generation grew up and never ended up moving away from their parents. And frankly, there is a very good reason to make sure that a child grows up to be self-sufficient. We can't afford to support you until you are old. By the time you are ready to leave the house, I will be ready to leave the workforce. I won't have any extra money to support you. That genetic drive to love your child also comes from somewhere. The fact that people want on a level that they don't even understand to procreate and continue their genetic line. It's something that isn't rational. It's written into us by billions of years of life that either replicated or went extinct. This is the last major essay that I'll be writing, and one theme that I've noticed in all my writings is balance. From the very first essay right up to the very end, I end up saying, well, make sure that you do this, but be careful because it's not always true. The fact is, that's because life isn't simple. If there was simply one thing that you could do, and if you did that thing you would be successful, then everybody would do that thing and everyone would be successful. That of course isn't the case. Some people are successful and others are not. Whether I like it or not, I can't predict exactly what's going to happen in your life, and I can't predict what sort of person you're going to be. I don't know if you are going to be the sort of person who needs to be told to toughen up, or if you're going to grow up to be the sort of person who needs to be told to soften up. All I can do is give you both sides of an argument so that you are informed and you can make your own decisions with your eyes wide open. In this case, it is absolutely true that you can't walk around with a chip on your shoulder talking about all the things that you're owed that you're not receiving. You simply can't. A lot of people in my generation have done that. It has made them miserable and it hasn't helped them move forward. You do need to be thankful for the good things in your life. Being thankful doesn't, however, mean being naive. A lot of people are going to be offering you a lot of things, and even if they deliver, sometimes you need to look a little bit past the surface. Because there actually are very few such things as a free lunch in this world. If your priorities happen to line up with the priorities of another person, and they can do something good for you and the cost of that something is decent, then go for it. Certainly, there are a lot of situations where you're going to come out ahead, especially if it comes to your parents. Ultimately, in a lot of ways, their best interest is your best interest, because if you succeed, then they've succeeded. Looking back though, I've been slowly writing these essays since I first learned you were going to be born, and despite spending hours and hours over months and months writing these, I feel like this is just a little piece of the things you're going to have to learn. Learning the basics, learning to question everything, recognizing that your life is long and you need to put in the work early to make sure that your entire life is a good one. Understanding that certain people are trying to use things you agree with to force you to agree to things that you don't want to do or don't agree with. Recognizing the value of a morality and sticking to it. Trying to figure out what your personal set of values is. Understanding how to meet someone that you can spend your life with. I think that all of these are very important, and hopefully some of the words that I put down will help you throughout your life. By the time you are old enough to understand some of this, there's a good chance I will be too far separated from the prime of my life to remember to pass these on, and that has always been one of the major points in trying to write it down early. Head out there, Grayson, head into the world and work hard, and don't be naive, and try to be a good person, and try to remember the legacy of all the people that came before you that shared your name, and maybe with the help of these lessons, and the lessons that I intend to teach you over the next 18 years, you will find your own way to live a good life. Thanks for listening to this final chapter of the Graysonian Ethic. Lessons for My Unborn Son. If you like the book and would like a physical copy or an electronic copy, please look it up. It's available on Amazon around the world. Barring that, please like and share with others.